Good evening. I'm Alex Truth.
And I'm Maya Clarity. Welcome to Truth Report. Tonight, we're investigating the architecture of cruelty, from Trump threatening NATO allies on European soil, to Democratic leaders funding the very immigration enforcement apparatus their own constituents are rising up to resist. What we uncovered isn't just policy failure. It's a pattern of power protecting itself while communities organize survival networks with sambusas and whistles.
Let's start with something that sounds absurd until you realize it's dead serious. Last week at the World Economic Forum in Davos, Donald Trump stood before European leaders and threatened Iceland. Not just Greenland, which he's been obsessing over publicly. Iceland, a founding member of NATO, protected by Article 5 collective defense obligations.
According to reporting from The Intercept, Trump told the assembled crowd, quote, "Until the last few days when I told them about Iceland, they loved me." He's talking about European leaders. He then blamed his threats for market instability, claiming our stock market took the first dip yesterday because of Iceland.
Now, the White House scrambled to claim Trump wasn't confusing Iceland with Greenland. But here's what he actually said about the target of his threats. He called it a piece of ice, cold and poorly located, that can play a vital role in world peace. Trump asserted NATO provides insufficient presence there.
Let's be crystal clear about what this means. Trump is publicly threatening territorial expansion into sovereign nations during a global economic forum. Not through diplomacy. Through intimidation. He told the New York Times that Greenland's ownership is very important to him, then revealed something chilling: "It's psychologically important for me."
Psychologically important. Not strategically. Not economically. Psychologically. We're watching imperial ambition justified through one man's psychological needs, announced on the world stage.
And the numbers matter here. 85% of Greenlanders oppose U.S. annexation, according to a 2025 survey. This isn't liberation. This isn't invitation. This is a former president, now candidate again, openly fantasizing about conquest while European allies watch in real time.
Iceland is bound by NATO's Article 5, an attack on one is an attack on all. So when Trump threatens Iceland, he's not just threatening one nation. He's threatening the entire premise of collective defense that's kept Europe stable since World War II. And he's doing it casually, almost as an aside, while discussing stock market fluctuations.
Neither Iceland's government nor Denmark's responded to The Intercept's requests for comment before publication. That silence is telling. What do you say when the leader of your defensive alliance is publicly discussing annexation of Allied territory?
You watch. You document. And you prepare. Because this isn't rhetoric anymore. This is threat assessment. Now let's turn to what's happening right here at home, where the machinery of immigration enforcement is expanding with bipartisan support, even as half the country wants it abolished entirely.
This next story exposes something rarely discussed in mainstream coverage: how Democratic leadership crafted the very funding deal that's enabling Trump's immigration crackdown, then started backing away only when they faced primary challenges. According to The Intercept's reporting, Senate and House Democratic appropriations leaders, including Representative Rosa DeLauro of Connecticut and Senator Patty Murray of Washington, negotiated a compromise that maintains ICE funding at current levels.
Let's break down what this deal actually contains. ICE gets full funding, no cuts. Customs and Border Protection sees a $1.3 billion reduction, but ICE untouched. The supposed guardrails are $20 million for body cameras and enhanced funding for oversight offices.
$20 million for body cameras. As if cameras stop violence. As if ICE doesn't already violate transparency laws with impunity. Kate Voigt from the ACLU put it bluntly: every dollar enables bad behavior and emboldens agencies.
And here's where it gets revealing about how power actually works. Shortly after announcing this compromise, key Democrats started reversing their positions. House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries announced he'd vote against the measure. Representative Grace Meng of New York said, "For constituents violently detained and Renee Good, who was wrongfully targeted by ICE agents, I cannot in good conscience vote for this bill."
Renee Good. Let's say her name again. Renee Good was a civilian killed by ICE agents. And initially, Democratic leadership thought funding those same agents with minimal oversight was an acceptable compromise.
What changed? Not the facts. Not the violence. The politics. Progressive primary challengers started circling. Constituents started calling. And suddenly the calculus shifted, not because the policy was wrong, but because it became politically dangerous.
Representative DeLauro, who helped craft the deal, offered this remarkably tepid defense: "It is complicated when you're both trying to govern and resist infringements." Complicated. That's the word she chose to describe funding the agents who killed Renee Good.
This is the language of institutional complicity. Trying to govern becomes the excuse for funding enforcement mechanisms you claim to oppose. And the oversight provisions they're touting as victories? They're worthless if ICE simply ignores them, which they demonstrably do.
The body camera provision is particularly cynical. We've seen this playbook in police reform. Add cameras, claim accountability, watch nothing change. Because cameras don't prevent violence, they just document it. And documentation without consequences is just evidence filed away.
What this story reveals is a Democratic leadership more afraid of Republican attacks over government shutdowns than of being complicit in immigration raids. They negotiated from a position of preemptive surrender, then only reconsidered when their own base threatened electoral consequences.
And that brings us to the broader question, what does the public actually want? Because according to recent polling, the political ground has shifted dramatically on immigration enforcement. Let's look at the numbers on abolishing ICE entirely.
This is where it gets really interesting. According to Economist YouGov polling cited in the Intercept, support for abolishing ICE has reached 46%, compared to 43% opposition. Read that again, abolitionists now outnumber opponents. This is the first time that's happened.
And look at the trajectory. In July 2025, only 27% supported abolishing ICE. We're talking about a 19-point swing in roughly 18 months. That's not a polling blip. That's a fundamental shift in public consciousness about what immigration enforcement should look like.
Here's what makes this politically explosive: this support crosses ideological lines. Yes, 29% of self-identified liberals support abolition. But portions of the 33% identifying as conservative and 29% as moderate also back this position.
So you have a policy position that's now plurality supported, growing rapidly, and crossing partisan boundaries. Basic political logic says Democrats should be embracing this, riding this wave, making it a signature issue. Instead, establishment Democrats are running away from it as fast as they can.
Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey went on Fox News to declare, "I do not support abolishing ICE." Senator Chris Murphy advised protesters to make ICE comply with the law, as if compliance was the issue rather than the law itself. Representative Darren Soto dismissed Congressional Hispanic Caucus efforts to terminate the agency.
The exceptions are telling. Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez has maintained consistent support for shutting down ICE entirely. Representative Delia Ramirez proposed limiting ICE's use of deadly force, though that stops short of abolition.
And here's the analysis from writer Michael Denzel Smith in The Intercept that cuts to the core. Democrats are pursuing what he calls strings-attached funding and cosmetic reforms like banning masked agents, rather than bold action that matches the political moment.
Smith argues this incremental approach actually costs Democrats politically. Think about it. You have plurality support for a transformative position, growing momentum, and instead of leading that movement, you're negotiating funding deals with minor oversight provisions that won't prevent the next Renee Good from being killed.
The political malpractice here is stunning. This is a winning issue being abandoned because it challenges institutional assumptions about what's possible. Smith suggests abolish IC may become the moderate position as public opinion continues shifting. Democrats risk being outflanked by their own base.
And while establishment Democrats debate funding formulas and oversight mechanisms, communities under attack are building their own protection systems. What's happening in Minneapolis right now is one of the most remarkable stories of grassroots resistance we've seen. The Somali community is literally patrolling their own neighborhoods to protect each other from federal immigration agents.
According to The Intercept's reporting from Minneapolis, residents like Kamal Yusuf conduct daily foot patrols from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. through the Cedar Riverside neighborhood. He wears a neon orange vest, uses signal chats and whistles to alert others when ICE agents are spotted. Yusuf says, "I am a citizen. I need to do this for my community."
Read that quote again. I am a citizen. He has to state that. He has legal protection under the Constitution. And he's still organizing patrols because citizenship doesn't guarantee safety when federal agents are flooding your neighborhood.
The organizing is sophisticated and community-wide. They created SALT, Somali American Leadership Table, in December to coordinate protection efforts. Community members deliver groceries to non-citizens who've stopped leaving their homes. A local diner provides free tea and sambusas to patrol volunteers.
Sambusas. They're organizing resistance with Somali pastries and mutual aid. This is what solidarity looks like on the ground, not policy papers, not funding debates, but neighbors feeding each other while they stand watch.
After Renee Good was killed by ICE agents, elderly Somali women distributed tea and sambusas at memorial protests. This is how community resilience works: you show up, you feed people, you keep each other safe.
Abdi Rahman, a founding member of the patrol efforts, explained their philosophy. We realized we can't fight the federal government. But we can come together and patrol the neighborhood, keep ICE out, de-escalate.
That's a profound statement about power and resistance. They're not claiming they can defeat the state. They're building systems to protect each other within the constraints of overwhelming force. It's practical, it's organized, and it's working.
But listen to this quote from Imam Yusuf Abdul. This moment in America is reminding us again of the Somali Civil War. Think about what that means. These are people who fled war, who came to America seeking safety, who built lives and businesses and raised American children. And now they're experiencing echoes of the trauma they escaped.
The economic impact is devastating. Business owner Danaya Omar reported customer traffic collapsed entirely. Shopkeeper Abdul's perfume store, previously bustling, now sits nearly empty. The Carmel Mall, typically vibrant, appeared deserted when reporters visited.
This is economic warfare through immigration enforcement. You don't have to deport everyone, you just have to create enough fear that people stop participating in public life. Businesses close. Communities contract. The economic engine shuts down.
And here's what's particularly cruel, many naturalized citizens carry U.S. passports while traveling just in case. Sadia Saman, despite being a citizen, skipped work and expressed anxiety, in case of ICE. Citizens are afraid of their own government.
The numbers make this even more stark. Nearly 58% of Minnesota's Somali population were U.S.-born. 87% of foreign-born Somalis are naturalized citizens. These aren't undocumented immigrants living in the shadows. These are American citizens being terrorized by federal agents.
One Uber driver named Abdi recounted a passenger citing anti-Somali conspiracy theories about welfare fraud. This is how viral misinformation fuels discrimination. It creates a permission structure for treating citizens as threats, for viewing entire communities through a lens of suspicion and criminality.
The Trump administration has called Somalis garbage. Not immigrants. Not even undocumented immigrants. Just Somalis. Citizens and non-citizens alike. That's not immigration policy. That's ethnic targeting.
They ended temporary protected status for Somalis, forcing thousands toward deportation in March 2026. These are people who've built lives here, raised families, started businesses. And they're being expelled based on country of origin.
So the community organizes patrols. They share tea and sambusas. They use signal chats and whistles. Because when the state targets you for elimination, you build networks of survival. You protect each other. You refuse to disappear.
And this brings us to our final story tonight, one that might seem disconnected from immigration enforcement, but actually reveals how justice can work when communities refuse to accept institutional failure. This is the story of Craig Stingley and his 13-year quest for accountability after his son's death.
On December 14, 2012, Corey Stingley, a 16-year-old black teenager, died following an altercation at a food mart in West Allis, Wisconsin. ProPublica's reporting details how Corey attempted to shoplift $12 worth of malt beverages, abandoned the items, and tried to leave. 3 white men, Robert Beringer, Jesse Cole, and Mario Lauman, physically restrained him on the store floor.
The medical examiner ruled his death a homicide caused by asphyxiation. Witnesses reported that Lauman, a former Marine, applied a chokehold while Beringer grabbed the teen's hair and pressed his head down. Cole assisted in restraining him. Corey Stingley died over $12 worth of merchandise he didn't even take.
Milwaukee District Attorney John Chisholm declined to press charges in January 2014. His reasoning? The men lacked intent to kill and weren't trained in restraint techniques. As if you need training to know that choking a teenager can kill him. As if lack of training absolves you of killing someone.
Craig Stingley, Corey's father, had no legal background. He was an electrical transformer engineer. But he spent 13 years meticulously reviewing police reports, witness statements, and security footage. He watched the incident hundreds of times, frame by frame.
In 2020, he filed a 14-page petition using Wisconsin's obscure John Doe statute, which allows private citizens to petition judges when prosecutors refuse charges. He quoted Supreme Court Justice Louis Brandeis, "Justice delayed is justice denied."
Think about what that required. A man with no legal training, grieving his son, teaching himself enough law to navigate an obscure statute that most attorneys don't even know exists. That's not just determination. That's love translated into action, sustained over more than a decade.
His petition led to Dane County District Attorney Ismail Ozan's appointment to review the case in July 2022. But here's where the story takes an unexpected turn. Craig Stingley chose restorative justice over prison sentences.
In April 2024, Stingley met with Robert Beringer, sharing photos and stories of Corey's life. Beringer reportedly showed remorse. In May, Jesse Cole presented Stingley with angel wing jewelry and a handwritten note expressing hope the gift would honor Corey's memory.
At a July session, Stingley and Cole watched surveillance footage together and reviewed the death certificate. According to Stingley, Cole acknowledged the store altercation caused Corey's death, not pre-existing conditions.
In January 2026, just weeks ago, both Beringer and Cole were charged with felony murder under a Wisconsin statute covering deaths resulting from false imprisonment. Under a deferred prosecution agreement, they pleaded guilty or no contest, potentially avoiding prison while performing community service and contributing to a charity in Corey's honor.
Stingley reflected on the outcome with these words, "I have never been able to breathe as clearly and as deeply and feel as free as after confronting the men involved." After 13 years, he could breathe.
Now, why are we including this story in tonight's immigration coverage? Because it demonstrates something crucial about justice, accountability, and community power that connects directly to what we've been discussing.
Craig Stingley couldn't rely on the system to deliver justice. The prosecutor declined charges. The state failed him. But he didn't accept that failure as final. He educated himself, he used tools most people don't know exist, and he forced accountability through sheer persistence.
The Somali community in Minneapolis is doing the same thing. They can't rely on the state to protect them, the state is what they need protection from. So they build patrols, they share resources, they organize survival networks.
These are both stories about communities filling the void left by institutions that either won't or can't deliver justice and safety. One is restorative justice after a killing. The other is preventative organizing to stop killings before they happen. Different contexts, same principle, when the system fails you, you build alternatives.
And that connects to the political failure we've documented tonight. Democrats who should be championing abolition are instead funding enforcement. They're negotiating with power rather than building alternatives to it.
The lesson from Craig Stingley's story isn't that restorative justice fixes everything. It's that accountability required 13 years of one man's labor because institutions abdicated their responsibility. The lesson from Minneapolis is that survival requires organized community defense because federal protection has become federal predation.
Now let's step back and look at the pattern across all these stories. Because when you line them up, something becomes unavoidable. We're watching the architecture of cruelty being built with bipartisan support, while communities organize resistance on their own.
Trump threatens NATO allies with territorial expansion, revealing imperial ambitions dressed up as psychological need. That's the international dimension. Borders and sovereignty mean nothing when power wants expansion.
Democratic leaders craft funding deals that maintain ICE budgets despite plurality support for abolition. That's the domestic institutional dimension, political establishments protecting enforcement mechanisms even when their own voters want them dismantled.
Somali communities in Minneapolis face ethnic targeting from federal agents, forcing citizens to carry passports and organize patrols in their own neighborhoods. That's the lived reality dimension, what enforcement actually looks like on the ground, in bodies and businesses and daily fear.
And Craig Stingley spends 13 years forcing accountability through a legal system designed to avoid it, ultimately choosing restorative justice over incarceration. That's the justice dimension, what it takes to get acknowledgement, let alone accountability, when institutions fail.
The connecting thread is power protecting itself. Trump protects his psychological needs by threatening allies. Democrats protect their institutional positions by funding enforcement they claim to oppose. ICE protects its existence by terrorizing communities into invisibility. Prosecutors protect their conviction rates by declining difficult cases.
And in every case, communities are left to organize their own survival. Greenlanders can't vote in U.S. elections but face annexation threats. Somalis organize patrols with whistles and sambusas. Craig Stingley teaches himself law to get justice for his son.
This is what it looks like when democracy is a performance rather than a practice. You get symbolic opposition, Democrats voting against bills they helped craft, but only after the vote doesn't matter. You get symbolic oversight, body cameras that document violence without preventing it. You get symbolic sovereignty, NATO allies threatened by their defensive partner.
Meanwhile, real resistance looks like foot patrols and signal chats. Real justice looks like a father watching surveillance footage hundreds of times. Real democracy looks like communities building alternatives because institutions have failed them.
The polling on ICE abolition is particularly revealing here. 46% support, growing from 27% just 18 months ago. That's not elite opinion. That's popular opinion shifting faster than political leadership can process.
And that gap, between what's popular and what's possible within existing institutions, that's where power reveals itself. Because if democracy worked, plurality support for abolition would translate into political action. Instead, we get funding deals with oversight provisions that everyone knows won't work.
So what do we do with this? Because the pattern is clear, the failures are documented, and communities are already organizing. The question isn't whether resistance is happening, it's whether institutional politics can catch up to the moral and practical demands of this moment.
First, stop accepting the premise that funding ICE with minor oversight is a victory. It's not. It's complicity with better PR. If 46% of people support abolition and only 43% oppose it, the political space exists to actually defund enforcement rather than just regulate it slightly better.
Second, learn from the organizing already happening. The Somali patrols in Minneapolis aren't waiting for policy solutions. They're building mutual aid and community defense right now. That model scales. That model works. And it doesn't require permission from Democratic leadership.
Third, understand that restorative justice isn't soft. Craig Stingley's process took 13 years and forced men to acknowledge they killed his son. That's harder than prison in many ways, it requires confrontation, acknowledgement, transformation. But it also required him to do the work that prosecutors refuse to do.
Fourth, connect these struggles. Immigration enforcement, police violence, imperial expansion, these aren't separate issues. They're all expressions of state power refusing accountability, and they all require community-based resistance.
The architecture of cruelty is extensive and bipartisan. But the architecture of resistance is growing, in foot patrols, in legal petitions, in shifting public opinion, in communities that refuse to accept deportation and occupation as inevitable.
We'll keep documenting both. Because journalism's job isn't to report what politicians say is possible. It's to report what's actually happening and who benefits from the current arrangement of power.
Thank you for watching Truth Report. I'm Alex Truth.
And I'm Maya Clarity. Stay informed. Stay organized. And remember, when institutions fail, communities build alternatives. Good night.